Romeo and Juliet is one of the most well-known plays of all time. First performed around 1597, but probably written by William Shakespeare in 1591. In no way is Romeo and Juliet an original play. As a matter of fact, Shakespeare likely took it directly from a play written 30 years earlier called The Tragic History of Romeo and Juliet. Even that was taken from an earlier play, which itself was translated from an even earlier Italian play. When it comes down to it, nearly all of Shakespeare's plays were borrowed from one source or another, so why do we forever associate great poetry and drama with William Shakespeare? The genius of Shakespeare has never been in the story itself, but the language in which he gave the story and its characters that made his plays both timeless and real. Romeo and Juliet is no exception. The play begins, almost like all plays at that time, with iambic pentameter, with an emphasis on the second syllable across 5 pairs of syllables. This is first done by the chorus, who in blank verse, which is the iambic pentameter with no rhyme, sets the stage for the whole story. As characters emerge, the genius of Shakespeare is revealed as each character is matched with a different form of poetry or verse. Shakespeare writes these lines for characters to move the play along, add humor or impending doom, demonstrate the levels of society and sometimes events which may connect the audience more with the characters and story on stage. What's even more revealing of Shakespeare's genius is the development of characters through the development of the styles of poetry. The best case of this evolution is found with the main character Romeo. Romeo begins the play in a total funk over the love of his life, Rosalind, who probably doesn't even know Romeo exists. These verses are written with the popular Petrarchian sonnet, where it seems love and religion meet. Romeo sees Rosalind as the ideal, perfect beauty. His friends even comment that this infatuation will kill poor Romeo. This is a key element as Shakespeare shows that Romeo thinks he will die over his somewhat ridiculous crush. Later in the play, Shakespeare will move to an anti-Petrarchian verse, showing as Romeo realizes that he is willing to die for real love. In a sense of saying his type of sonnet is more tragic and more real than a Petrarchian sonnet. To this setup, Shakespeare has Romeo spout out more Petrarchian verse when he first sees Juliet, and even uses it as a pickup line. Juliet almost mocks it, but starts an anti-Petrarchian sonnet in which they share or trade lines. This begins as Romeo and Juliet touching palms together. The next 14 lines make up a shared sonnet with a rhyme scheme of A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. A perfect sonnet about love which captures the moment of Romeo and Juliet's life. They are about to start the next set of shared lines when the nurse interrupts the first date. Romeo and Juliet go past the initial love at first sight phase with the interaction at the balcony. Here Romeo speaks in metaphors such as, This could seem more of a drippy Petrarchian sonnet, but Shakespeare wants the audience to realize that Romeo really believes Juliet is the sun and that love, real love, can transform the world for those really in love. Juliet reinforces this. Juliet basically says that words of society and the feud between their families may be stronger than her and Romeo's love. The next scene, Shakespeare tests Romeo's new love through Friar Lawrence and his friend Mercutio. It's almost a test of Juliet's question. Romeo does not offer Friar Lawrence or Mercutio the evidence of true love. In addition, Romeo speaks in more common body language to Mercutio. Mercutio even says that this is the real Romeo. Shakespeare could have probably written Romeo some powerful lines as evidence of the love that is happening, but instead he probably setting up the fates of Romeo and Juliet. By Act 3, with the showdown between Mercutio and Tybalt, Romeo is truly in love, and among his buddies he isn't using body language, and it is probably the realization that Mercutio has lost his friend to love, and that his jovial mood turns sour, and the play switches gears from love and comedy to tragedy. A plague on both your houses. The next few scenes as Romeo is banished and Juliet is betrothed to Paris, Shakespeare tests the love of Romeo and Juliet. Friar Lawrence secretly marries Romeo and Juliet, and they spend one last night together, the last time in the play they are together alive. Following the wedding night, Shakespeare spends more time developing the verse of Juliet from a girl to more of a woman. Now as things most perilous, Juliet shows her growth and intelligence by going toe-to-toe with her parents and deciding she does not need her nurse for advice. She sees the power of her decisions as well as the limits. The scene, Juliet holds the sleeping potion, and she sees her own choice of life and death. Juliet takes the sleeping potion. Romeo waits for word from Friar Lawrence, which never comes. He learns of Juliet's apparent death. Romeo's reaction is dramatic in his lost and distraught, but not the weepy fall to the ground as in earlier act. His character as Juliet's has matured, as has their love, since they have both broke ties from the earthly barriers of their family feud. Romeo lashes out at the only thing left to keep their love apart. Fate. Bum bum bum. Which is in a way a character itself. Shakespeare has guided through the play, gaining prominence to the moment when Romeo says, "Then I defy you, stars," stars being the metaphor for fate, which everyone is written in the stars. Mirroring Juliet's verse with the sleeping potion, Romeo seeks the apothecary for a poison, so he can too leave nothing to fate. In his last moments at the tomb with sleeping Juliet, he takes the poison, taking charge of his life from fate in order to spend eternity with Juliet by shaking the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. As Juliet awakens to find Romeo dead, she kisses him to share the same poison, but when that doesn't work, she bravely falls upon Romeo's dagger. "Oh, happy dagger, this is my sheath." So ends the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare leaves us with less developed characters and verse, much like the beginning of the play. Here Shakespeare underlines the tragedy with the emptiness of the characters and the love they created. A story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo.